The insult cure. Yeah, well, you're a rhino-faced airhead. Blake Branson's voice shattered the peace of the quiet afternoon, startling his mother, who was folding socks in the laundry room. The back door crashed shut, and Mrs. Branson heard Blake stomp inside, still shouting, "And you smell bad, too." Mrs. Branson glanced out the window and saw the retreating back of her son's best friend. "Blake Branson, why were you yelling at Chucky Keystop?" Chucky Keystop. He looked like he was about to cry. Red in the face and looking very defiant, Blake said, "Chucky is just a big airheaded old crybaby. I don't care if I ever play with him again. He's a dummy." "Why, Blake!" gasped Mrs. Branson, dropping the socks and storming into the kitchen, where Blake was throwing cabinet doors open in search of a snack. "It's not like you to say such horrid things to your friend. I hope you're going to apologize." "Why should I apologize to a crybaby?" retorted Blake. "Everything I said was true. He is a crybaby, and he does have a nose like a rhino." "Well, that doesn't mean you should point it out," said Mrs. Branson. "But it's funny," Blake protested. "I didn't hear Chucky laughing," Mrs. Branson snapped. "You march up to your room, young man, and think about how you hurt people's feelings when you say unkind things." Blake sulked out of the kitchen and went up to his room, where the only thing he thought about was more funny things to say. In fact, he got out a piece of paper and began to write them down. By dinner time, the list had grown quite long. Blake's hand was tired from writing, but he felt a warm sense of accomplishment. He had come up with what he felt were some truly hilarious insults, and he couldn't wait to try them out. He heard voices outside his bedroom window and looked out to see the 3 gray children walking down the street. "Hey, you snaggle-tooth eagle-beak dimwits!" "Blake Branson!" roared his father's voice behind him. Blake jumped and whirled around. Mr. Branson was standing in the doorway, looking very angry. "Seems to me," said Mr. Branson through gritted teeth, "that the dimwit is the one yelling the insults out the window at unsuspecting passers-by." Blake gulped. Mr. Branson went on, "Your mother told me about what you said to Chucky Keystop. If you continue to say mean things, son, you won't have a single friend left in the whole school. Now come on downstairs and eat your dinner." Supper was a very quiet affair in the Branson household that night, even though Blake's mother had made his favorite, pot roast. Mrs. Branson was too upset to speak. Mr. Branson was too angry, and Blake was too busy thinking up new insults. After dinner, he went back to his room and added them to his list, which he then shoved under some books on his desk. Mrs. Branson found it there the next morning after Blake had left for school. She read, "Four eyes, slophead, dimwit, duck feet, cow eyes, pig eyes, dog eyes, brace face, rake teeth, smelly head, rat face, spitty lips, snaggletooth, mush mouth, dog breath, horse face, bird brain, bug eyes." Poor Mrs. Branson was more upset than ever. She went to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat staring at Blake's list. After a few minutes, she picked up the phone and dialed her friend Mrs. Goodwin. "Oh, Gertrude, I don't know what to do. Blake has developed the most awful mouth. He's always saying mean things to people, and just now I actually found a list of all the insults he's dreamed up." "You poor dear," clucked Mrs. Goodwin. "I feel so sorry for you. Why, just last night I was telling Worthmont that Blake had been extremely insulting to our darling little children at school yesterday. He called our dear little Percival a hog-face, and he called Prissy and Candace fat cow-eyed dummies." Mrs. Branson groaned. "I'm so very, very sorry, Gertrude. I'll deal with Blake as soon as he comes home from school." "I would appreciate that, Bernice," said Mrs. Goodwin emphatically. Percival was in tears over it, the poor little thing. It isn't his fault his nose turns up at the end. Of course, some people think upturned noses are the most attractive kind of noses, but I suppose a little boy like Blake can't be expected to know that. No, I suppose not, Mrs. Branson sighed, thinking privately that Percival Goodwin's nose did look rather like a pig's snout. But still, she told herself sternly, that didn't excuse Blake's saying so. She apologized once more to Mrs. Goodwin and hung up the phone. When Blake came home from school that afternoon, he said, "Mrs. Moonface sent home a note for you, Mom." "Blake," cried Mrs. Branson, "I will not have you calling your teacher names. Mrs. Mooney is a very nice woman and a fine teacher." She sighed and unfolded the note. It said, "Dear Mrs. Branson, I don't know what to think of Blake's behavior toward his classmates. Blake is a very good student and was very kind at the beginning of the term, but now he says so many mean things that he is alienating himself from most of the class. I suggest that you call, you know who, Mrs. Pigglewiggle. She has cured so many children of some of the worst habits. Let me know if I can be of further help. Sincerely, Elizabeth Mooney." Mrs. Branson put the note on the kitchen bulletin board. Then she sent Blake up to his room to do his homework. "You are to stay in your room until your father comes home. This mean streak you have developed must end." Blake stalked off, muttering under his breath, "Old crab patch." "What did you say?" demanded his mother. "Nothing, Mom," said Blake, hastily retreating to his room. As soon as he was gone, his mother called Mrs. Pigglewiggle. When Mrs. Pigglewiggle answered hello in her cheery voice, Mrs. Branson said, "Oh, Mrs. Pigglewiggle, this is Blake Branson's mother." Mrs. Pigglewiggle laughed merrily. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Branson. I wondered if you'd be getting in touch. I've been hearing about Blake from the other children. Some of them apparently think he's quite funny, but only if he's making fun of someone else, of course. I gather he has developed quite a sharp tongue." "He certainly has," said Mrs. Branson. "I even got a note from his teacher today, and I won't tell you what he said about her. I really don't understand what has happened to him. He used to be such a sweet boy." Mrs. Pigglewiggle laughed again. "Well, perhaps I can help. Tell Blake to stop here on his way home from school tomorrow to pick up a package. It will be rather heavy, but Blake is a strong boy. Don't bother to say anything to Blake about his mean remarks. After dinner tomorrow, let Blake open the package and read the instructions. I imagine you'll see good results by the end of the week." When Mrs. Branson came home, he found his wife humming happily as she fixed dinner. Did I say Mr. Branson? Anyway, Mr. Branson. "Well, this is a welcome change," he said. "Has our smart-mouthed son mended his ways?" "Oh, no, quite the contrary," said Mrs. Branson placidly. "In fact, he's worse than ever. But don't worry, Norman. Help is on the way." "I know you know a Norman, Chloe." The next day at breakfast, Mrs. Branson told Blake to stop by Mrs. Pigglewiggle's house after school and pick up a package. "Sure, Mom," said Blake, running out the door. Mrs. Branson heard him yelling at Larry Gray, "Hey, lizard lips, wait up!" That afternoon, Blake came staggering in the back door carrying a large package. "Wow, this sure is heavy. I wanted to borrow Dick Thompson's wagon to haul this in, but he said, 'No way, Blake, you're just too mean.' So I called him a rat-faced moron." Blake doubled over and laughed at his own wit. Mrs. Branson didn't laugh. She took the package and set it on the kitchen table. She was tempted to peek inside, but she didn't want to risk interfering with Mrs. Pigglewiggle's cure. But Blake noticed that dinner was served very early that evening. As soon as the plates were cleared, Mrs. Branson said, "Now let's see what's in this package from Mrs. Pigglewiggle." Mr. Branson carefully untied the heavy twine, unwrapping a very large stack of black paper with ragged edges, a fat pen marked "Magic Glow-in-the-Dark Pen," and a note addressed to Blake from Mrs. Pigglewiggle. "Dear Blake, write down every insult you say each day before you go to bed at night. Good luck, Mrs. Pigglewiggle." "Cool!" Blake shouted. He carried the paper and pen up to his room and put it on his desk. Then he took the first sheet of black ragged-edged paper from the pile and wrote "Lizard Lips" with the special pen. The ink was white and faintly luminous. "Wow, it glows!" Blake said excitedly. Suddenly the piece of paper fluttered into the air. Blake shouted in surprise and watched as the paper floated up to the ceiling. It hovered there above his bed, the words "Lizard Lips" glowing off the page. "This is the coolest thing ever," Blake whispered in awe. He reached eagerly for another sheet of the black paper. "Rat-faced moron," he wrote, and to his delight, this paper, too, fluttered off the desk to hover just below the ceiling. Before long, the ceiling over his bed was covered with dozens of ragged-edged black pages, each of them emblazoned with a glowing white insult. The room was lit up by the luminous scrawls. Blake's father poked his head into the room. He caught sight of the fluttering papers and stared for a very long time, his eyes wide and thoughtful. "Well, son," he murmured, "keep this up and you won't need to turn on any lights in this room." Mr. Branson cleared his throat. "I think that's enough writing for tonight, Blake. Time to get ready for bed." When he came into the kitchen where his wife was finishing the dinner dishes, he said weakly, "Bernice, I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it with my own 2 eyes." He described the floating black pages with their white words shining down on Blake's bed. "It's like a Milky Way of insults." The next morning, Blake looked a little sleepy when he sat down to eat his breakfast, and he couldn't stop yawning. His father looked at Blake over the morning paper. "Eat your breakfast, son. I'll give you a ride today. You look a little too tired to walk to school." Blake could barely keep his eyes open in class, and in fact, Mrs. Mooney had to prod him gently to wake up twice. As Blake came slowly home from school, dragging his feet, he was almost too tired to yell mean things at Kitty Wheeling and Molly O'Toole when they ran giggling past him. But Molly brushed his shoulder and Blake yelled after them, "Hey, watch where you're going, lame brains, knock-kneed ugly old losers." Kitty Wheeling yelled back at Blake, "You're the big loser, falling asleep in class." "Yeah," laughed Molly O'Toole. Blake trudged home, woofed down his snack, and hurried up to his room. He was eager to write down the day's brilliant insults on the magic black paper. He filled several pages with all the things he remembered saying that day, and one by one they joined the other insults hovering above his bed. The light was so bright Blake had to squint a little, but still he went on writing with the magic pen. When he came to the end of the mean things he had said, he found the list he'd made earlier in the week and began to copy the insults from there onto the black pages. He worked steadily until dinner time, completely ignoring his homework. After dinner, Mrs. Branson sent him back upstairs to do his math. Blake noticed with some satisfaction that he did not need to turn on his desk light. The glowing insults lit the whole room quite brightly. Mr. and Mrs. Branson came upstairs to see how Blake was getting on. There was a faint glow coming from the door of his room. Mr. Branson chuckled. "Too bad this can't continue. Think of the savings on our utility bill." They went into Blake's room and found Blake squinting over his homework beneath a harsh white glow. The entire ceiling and part of the walls were covered with sheets of the ragged-edged black paper. There were even papers stuck to the windows and the closet door, nasty remarks shining from each one of them with a glaring light. Blake looked pale and pasty under the harsh light. He was rubbing his temples, and he looked sick and cross. "Blake," said his mother, "are you all right? You look terrible." "I have a headache," Blake said. "I'm not surprised," said his father. "It's bright enough in here to blind you." He shook his head in disbelief. "I hope you'll be able to sleep with all these words lighting up the room, Blake." Blake kissed his parents good night and crawled into bed. No matter how tightly he shut his eyes, the glowing ceiling kept him awake. He couldn't fall asleep, and the longer he squinted up at the ceiling, the more the black, raggedy pieces of paper seemed to take on scary shapes. His brilliant words no longer seemed very funny. He scrunched way down in his bed, pulled his pillow over his eyes, and fell asleep. He had nightmares that the pieces of paper were chasing him, shouting insults and sticking to his body. The next morning, Blake had dark circles under his eyes, and he was so tired from sleeping poorly with all the bright glowing light that he could barely eat his breakfast. He fell asleep in class 3 times. When Molly O'Toole poked him in the back to wake him up, he started to call her a baboon. But the thought of adding one more glowing remark to the collection on his ceiling made him clamp his mouth shut. After school, he fell asleep on the couch, and he was still sleeping there when his father got home from work. Mr. Branson shook him gently to wake him for dinner. Blake let out a yell and sat up, crying out, "Don't let the raggedy papers get me, Dad." "Calm down, Blake. It's only a dream," said Mr. Branson. He rubbed Blake's back a little. "Sounds like a doozy. Want to tell me about it?" Blake began to cry. "Please, Dad. My room scares me. It's so bright I can't sleep. I really don't like to read all those mean things on my ceiling. I'm afraid of all those black, raggedy pieces of paper flying around. Do I have to keep writing down mean things?" Mr. Branson laughed. "Only if you plan to keep saying them." Blake shuddered. "No way, Dad. I don't know why I ever said them in the first place. They used to seem funny, but they don't anymore. I'm sorry I ever called anyone such awful things." "In that case, let's see what we can do about that collection of yours," said Mr. Branson. "You grab a garbage bag, and I'll get the broom." When they walked into Blake's room, all the black, raggedy pieces of paper had fallen to the floor. The white insults were only faintly glowing now, and some had completely disappeared. As they stuffed the last pieces of paper into the garbage bags, and Blake's father put the magic pen in his pocket to return to Mrs. Pigglewiggle, he said, "Hey, maybe you can invite Chucky to spend the night tomorrow." Blake smiled happily up at his father as they dragged the full garbage bags out into the hall. "Great idea, Dad," he said, "except maybe the day after tomorrow. I've got a lot of sleep to catch up on." The end of another Mrs. Pigglewiggle story. Hope you enjoyed it. Love you. Love you, Chloe.